So then you have to talk about the context of the image at hand. And the only reason they're calling it anti-Semitic and they're trying to reach in such a way, to grasp at straws in this way, is because that's how the supporters of the far-right Israeli state weaponize claims of anti-Semitism and often their Jewish identity in order to smear people and push them into silence when they speak up about the atrocities that the Israeli state has committed against Palestine. There's a lot of historical evidence for that being one of their favored tactics. And that's a problem. Not only because I'm a normal person, so I believe that Palestinian people are human beings and deserve to live, but also because I think anti-Semitism is bad, and I don't like to see it, even though I'm not Jewish. So if you're gonna make bullshit claims about anti-Semitism in this way, that just ends up cheapening actual instances of it, which then makes pointing out actual instances of it more difficult, which then makes fighting anti-Semitism more difficult, which then, in a roundabout way, makes anti-Semitism more likely to happen, at least unchecked. And that's not good. So anyway, I was gonna start the segment with something along the lines of, in perhaps one of the worst tragedies to have befallen the state of Israel, Greta Thunberg had an autism octopus in a picture supporting Gaza. And see, the joke there is that it's a nothing story that nobody should have gotten mad at because there are more pressing and important matters at hand. I feel like that's a fine joke, but I don't know. Who's gonna cancel me, all right? Listen, I'm uncancelable when it comes to this kind of shit, all right? My record on foreign policy opinions is unimpeachable. So, if woke conservatives come for me for such a joke, I might just have to, write a book and sell it in response, Triggered, perhaps, I'll title it. So, another person who seems to have their head on straight, Greta Thunberg, made a post that said, "Stand with Gaza. Climate justice now. It's for the people. Free Palestine. This Jew stands with Palestine." Right? And people found out that, it's an octopus in the picture next to Greta Thunberg. And so some of the most anti-Semitic people on the internet, who are so excited to be anti-Semitic on the internet, especially on Twitter after Elon bought it, are now pretending to care about anti-Semitism because they don't like Greta Thunberg, because she thinks climate change is real, because she understands reality, and scientific reality. They don't like her because of that, because they're, for some reason, doing propaganda for the oil companies, even though they're probably not getting money from them, though some are, I'm sure. But anyway, it's an octopus, and the funny thing about that is, it's an autoctopus, it's an autism octopus. The point of it is because I'm assuming Greta Thunberg is autistic or in some way has difficulty expressing emotion verbally. So in order to express emotion non-verbally, you can have things such as this cute little stuffed animal octopus, and the cool thing about it is that it's reversible. So this side is blue and angry or upset, and you can flip it inside out in the inverse, and the inside is pink and happy. So you could tell people what you're feeling at any given time without having to talk about it, because if you have whatever flavor of autism Greta Thunberg has, that can be difficult. So having that is helpful. Yeah? Now, it turns out that in historic anti-Semitic artwork, the octopus and really long tentacles has been used by, the Nazis and a variety of other anti-Semitic propaganda artists out there, I guess, have used the octopus and its long tentacles to say, like, the Jewish people, they have their tentacles and everything because, anti-Semites think they control it all or whatever, which is obviously foolish. So now Greta Thunberg is being called an anti-Semite for believing that Palestinians are human beings and shouldn't be wholesale slaughtered by the far-right Israeli state, especially considering half of Gaza is around her age, or younger, actually. I don't know how old Greta Thunberg is at this point. She's 20 years old, okay. So younger, actually. She is older than half of Palestine, and she's only 20. So, if you have, a shred of empathy, you should be able to put yourself in the shoes of a Palestinian civilian who is not a part of Hamas, no matter how much the far right wants you to believe that every single Palestinian is a Hamas sympathizer, supporter, or member, Hamas being the far right terror group. And you'd be like, if I was a Palestinian in Palestine, I wouldn't want to be bombed by the Israeli state. That doesn't sound great. In addition to that, it's also probably not good for the climate as well. People be like, oh my God, Greta Thunberg, you're only talking about climate change, and that's the only thing you're allowed to talk about. You can't have opinions on any other political matter. So what does Israel bombing Palestine have to do with the climate change? Well, It turns out that exploding gunpowder and a variety of other bombs, 6,000 of which have already been detonated in Gaza, I believe, by the Israeli state, is probably not great for the environment. Not only the environment when, like, it goes in the air and whatnot, but, like, the actual land, the buildings, the habitats, the domiciles that people have tried to build to survive, because shelter is one of the fundamental necessities of a human being, and has allowed us, the procurement and building of shelter has allowed us to progress to the point we're at in our species. Pretty important. So destroying that is also not very good. And it's not going to be good for the local ecology either, because you're going to get a lot of animals in the crossfire. You're going to get a lot of this shit in runoff, in rain and whatnot. You're going to get a lot of the infrastructure getting busted up, as much as there is in Gaza, because it's essentially an open-air prison. You know, the wardens being the Israeli state. There's a whole bunch of shit. And also, yeah, apparently white phosphorus was confirmed to have been used by Israel, which is a war crime, because that shit literally burns you, and you can't get it off. It, like, melts your flesh. So, obviously, there's a reason for her to care about it, if she can only talk about climate change, but she can talk about other shit. So anyway, unfortunately, Greta then capitulated to the woke mob and the woke conservatives out there and deleted the tweet, which was a massive L in my opinion. She should have held firm and used the event as an educational opportunity to tell people about autism, how it works, how, you know, difficulties verbalizing your emotions or emotional states can make your life difficult, and how implements that help you do that, like a cute little reversible octopus to allow people to know your mood without you telling them because you have difficulty doing that, would be cool, actually. Because, funnily enough, it's a lot of ableism involved in this whole conversation for people shitting on Greta. And it's also a whole lot of minimizing anti-Semitism in a general sense. Like, if you actually cared about actual instances of anti-Semitism, you would be one of the biggest voices against the Republican Party in the United States of America. You would be one of the biggest voices against conservatives broadly who tend to be more anti-Semitic historically. You would be talking about certain pundits in conservative media. And I'm sure you know some liberals as well. You know, you would, if you actually cared about anti-Semitism, you would not support Netanyahu's far-right Israeli government, because Netanyahu is literally a Holocaust revisionist. He believes some stupid bullshit about how, like, Hitler was influenced by Muslims to do the Holocaust or some shit like that, which is not historically true. No historian has ever backed that up. He is literally a Holocaust revisionist, and his son has done some weird shit to that effect as well. So that's literally him being anti-Semitic, even though he's the head of the Israeli state. Turns out Jewish people can wittingly or unwittingly propagate anti-Semitism, and it is important to be able to understand that as a Jewish person, so that you don't by accident, and you certainly, you know, shouldn't on purpose, because anti-Semitism is bad. Nothing wrong with being Jewish. And obviously that's the same for any other minority group, right? There are a lot of Latinos out there that propagate anti-Latin shit, either wittingly or unwittingly. There's a lot of black people that might accidentally or on purpose do this shit. It happens to all people, gay people, yada, yada, yada. So luckily, on this New York Post article at least, we have another community note W. Thunberg's octopus toy is a doll used to display emotion by autistic people who do not show expressions in the same way allistic people do. Allistic people being people who do not have autism. And, you know, it has a link. There's a really good marketing push for the Octoplush, I guess. I'm sure they're having fun with this. I'm pretty sure they probably don't like this, but whatever. Maybe they got more sales out of it. Thunberg's octopus has short, fat tentacles and looks nothing like the ugly, reaching octopuses used to represent evil in the propaganda, which is true. It's very cute, actually. So, of course, it's sad that it had to come to this, but it turns out that this image that Greta posted was actually doctored, and this is the real one that I was able to dig up. It's so dumb, man. It's so stupid. I followed this up, of course. Me, when I definitely care about stopping anti-Semitism, and am most certainly not diminishing actual instances of it instead. Amazon, get this bigoted filth off your goddamn shelves. This is at least one of the octopuses, the octopi, that I was able to find on Amazon. And frankly, I think we should be canceling Amazon for allowing this at a 33% off sale as well. What the hell? If you look at the octopus in the propaganda artwork, it's the Kraken, not just some random blue octopus. That's true, yeah. The Kraken is like a mythological creature, right? And there's a lot of historical references to it. It's a very specific creature, and it's usually, you know, a threat to humans in the instances that it comes up. Because not all octopi are. Like the octopi generally, like, look at this. You ready? Are you ready to watch out, guys? This might be not for the faint of hearted. If you got a fainting couch, now it's time to get it out. Look at this anti-Semite. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. How could you be? What the fuck? There's no way, dude. How is this allowed? I guess it's because we have free speech in America. And you can just look up anti-Semitic imagery if you want on Google. But what the hell is this, man? So it turns out octopi are not inherently anti-Semitic. So then you have to talk about the context of the image at hand. And the only reason they're calling it anti-Semitic and they're trying to reach in such a way, to grasp at straws in this way, is because that's how the supporters of the far-right Israeli state weaponize claims of anti-Semitism and often their Jewish identity in order to smear people and push them into silence when they speak up about the atrocities that the Israeli state has committed against Palestine. There's a lot of historical evidence for that being one of their favored tactics. And that's a problem. Not only because I'm a normal person, so I believe that Palestinian people are human beings and deserve to live, but also because I think anti-Semitism is bad, and I don't like to see it, even though I'm not Jewish. So if you're gonna make bullshit claims about anti-Semitism in this way, that just ends up cheapening actual instances of it, which then makes pointing out actual instances of it more difficult, which then makes fighting anti-Semitism more difficult, which then, in a roundabout way, makes anti-Semitism more likely to happen, at least unchecked. And that's not good. Because if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, I have regularly talked about the history of anti-Semitism and how it has a lot of connections and overlap to a variety of other bigotries, like racism against black people, like bigotry against women and people with the capacity to give birth, like bigotry against queer people, and the list goes on. I have for a long time opposed anti-Semitism and regularly called out anti-Semitic actors on the right on this channel. So I actually give a fuck about stopping anti-Semitism, which is why I'm not making stupid-ass claims like this. Like, oh my god, Greta Thunberg, she's got, oh, it's octopus, so it's because we're talking about Israel and the atrocities against the Palestinian people, it has to obviously be anti-Semitic. No, that's not how that works. I'm sorry, it isn't. And if you're claiming that, you're either wittingly or unwittingly aiding anti-Semites. Because there has been a lot of anti-Semitism in response to the recent conflict of Israel-Palestine. But this is not one of those instances. And that is also to say that there has also been a lot of Islamophobia in response to it as well. And it's not good. But in other news, at least a shred of hope, we have data for progress. 2023 survey of 1,329 likely voters. Voters across party lines agreed that the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Quote, the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and a de-escalation of violence in Gaza. The U.S. should leverage its close diplomatic relationship with Israel to prevent further violence and civilian deaths. You got strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree. All likely voters. You got 30% strongly agreeing, 36% somewhat agreeing, 10 don't know, and you got a handful disagreeing. And then when it comes to the partisan angle, Democrats overwhelmingly think a ceasefire and de-escalation is the play. Independents and third parties, about half of them as well. And even Republicans believe this to be the case. Though often Republicans think this way, not because of like any humanitarian calculus they're doing in their heads, but because they don't want more of, the US's money to go to Israel to fund war. They want more of that money to go to multinational corporations and mega wealthy CEOs in the form of subsidies and tax breaks. And they've been propagandized into thinking about it in that way instead of the idea of, well, we shouldn't be funding an ongoing attempt at ethnic cleansing in Gaza at the hands of the far-right Israeli government. That's bad, actually. So we should probably, pause funding that because that's not good, And to connect it back to how I've always talked about how anti-Semitism is bad and how it has a lot of overlap in other forms of bigotry, well, we have one of the biggest anti-trans lunatics out there, Dr. Lupus, who we've talked about in the past on this channel. A person who talks about trans people getting whatever kind of facial feminization surgeries or whatever else to make themselves feel better about how they look and how people perceive them in regards to the gender identity they identify as and would like to be seen as, all this kind of stuff. She's got an insane amount of plastic surgery done, and that's fine on its face. But not fine if you're going to call out other people for doing that, just because it happens to be related to their gender in a more obvious way, even though this is still related to your gender, just in a less obvious way, right? So we got Dr. Lupus posting interesting to 100,000 likes, and you got the Secretary of Treasury, the Attorney General, yada, 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 and it all has Israeli flags next to them. Wow, what is this trying to say? Oh, well, there might be a lot of Jewish people in government because there's a fair amount of Jewish people everywhere, and there's also a lot of people who aren't Jewish in the government. But the right-wingers are saying, well, the only reason we're giving so much money to Israel is because there's a lot of Jewish people in the government, even though we've always given money to Israel, no matter if it was a Democrat or a Republican in office. For some reason, Republicans are trying to both sides this. They're trying to play both sides so that they always come out on top. I'll just put it this way. Not every Republican is anti-Semitic, but most anti-Semites tend to vote Republican. You know, not all Republicans are neo-Nazis, but all neo-Nazis vote for Republicans. They seem to understand which side has a closer hold on their priorities. But apparently it's also the case that not all of these people held positions simultaneously in office. And this is also true, that like in lists like these, they add names of people they suspect of being Jewish, but aren't like confirmed of being, you know, Jewish, because they're insane. Like anti-Semites, it's a conspiracy theory, like all bigotry is. So they have to make shit up to make their narrative work, because they always have. And, you know, for somebody who has been one of the bigger megaphones on Twitter for anti-trans hysteria, to also be dabbling in anti-Semitism is not shocking at all, whatsoever. Not even close to shocking. There's actually a lot of roots of anti-Semitism in anti-trans bigotry. Reason being, multifaceted actually. One of the major ones, of course, and the one that we bring up all the time on this channel, is the first books that were burned by the Nazis was the books, the archives of research on gender identity and sexuality at the German Institute for Sexuality, founded by a gay Jewish man, Magnus Hirschfeld. The first vaginoplasty was performed here, etc., etc. The first books that were banned were about trans people, study on gender identity and sexuality, and a variety of things related to it. Trans people were used as the early scapegoat to give plausible deniability to the Nazis to wreak havoc on Jewish people, disabled people, queer people, etc., the elderly, because queer people were also put in the concentration camps. Not just queer Jewish people, but any queer person, or people suspected of being queer, right? You know, that's what the pink triangle was. It denoted a gay person. Not only this, but there's also anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about how, apparently, for whatever reason, Jewish people that are in power, the anti-Semites say, they're trying to trans our men, and they're pushing all this gender identity stuff to weaken our men, so that our military is weaker, and then we do worse on the world stage when it comes to being a world superpower, some shit like that. And that's not even like an uncommon conspiracy theory, because they also think that way when it comes to like black people. Anti-Semites think Jewish people are trying to like insert black people and other minorities into communities to disrupt them or whatever, because those anti-Semites are also racist, and they think simply having black and brown people exist in an area will make those areas worse, even though that's not the case. It is usually the result of a variety of racist policies that lead majority black and brown areas to being in more disrepair, like over-policing, like lack of investment into a variety of aspects of that infrastructure and that little micro-society in these specific areas. But, you know, they're racist, they're anti-Semites, they don't make any sense. Everything they say is hypocritical and contradictory because it's all made up and the points don't matter. Reminded of all the majority white communities that shut down public pools to prevent black people from using them? Yeah, after desegregation. A lot of crazy shit going on. So it is often said that misogyny is one of the oldest bigotries, and it certainly is. But anti-Semitism is up there too. And these all have overlap. All bigotries are intersectional by necessity. That's how they are weaponized. And I've talked about this before. There are a variety of videos that I could bring up about it. But, you know, your feminism and your view on politics should be intersectional and through an intersectional lens, because all of the fights for liberation of oppressed peoples are connected and have overlap, and those that would seek to do those groups harm are usually propagating bigotry against a variety of groups. Yeah, the right-wing civil rights ladder dilemma, as I called it. And in order to fight back, you need to understand that, and that's what intersectional feminism seeks to do. Much the same way, bigotry is also intersectional. So it's all very dumb. As always, solidarity with the people in Gaza who are currently being bombarded by the Israeli state and its thousands of rockets, half of the population being children. Solidarity with the Palestinians who oppose Hamas. Solidarity with Israelis who oppose the state of Israel aggressing and oppressing on Palestine. Jewish people who are progressive and against the bloodshed as well. Shit's fucked. But, hopefully Martin Luther King Jr. was correct, and the arc of justice does... What is it? The arc of justice is long, but bends toward justice or some shit? The arc of history is long and bends toward justice. Hopefully that's true. But the thing is that don't bend alone. It doesn't bend on its own. You gotta push that arc. And that's what we're trying to do.